The History of North America podcast is a sweeping historical saga of the United States, Canada, and Mexico, from their deep origins to our present epoch. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this exciting, fascinating, epic journey through time, focusing on the compelling, wonderful, and tragic stories of North America's inhabitants, heroes, villains, leaders, environment, and geography. This incredible historical adventure follows a path of exciting events led by interesting people who reach beyond their grasp to touch key moments in time. The History of North America podcast series is an educational and entertaining look at the thrilling chronicle of North America, an action-packed tale of a continent that is still unfolding. I invite you to come along for the ride.
Welcome to Season 13 of the 5-Minute Biographies podcast. Here is your host, Wayne Armstrong.
Hi guys, welcome to the 5-Minute Biographies podcast. Before we get started, I'd just like to point out that other than introducing you to Mark Vinette's History of North America podcast, we don't carry any advertising, and so if you'd like to support the show, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel at 5minutebiographies.com/YouTube, or if you'd like to support it in a more direct way by, say, buying me a coffee, please check out 5minutebiographies.com/coffee to see how. Also, don't forget to take a look at our sister show, 5 Minute History, at 5minutehistory.com, and if you'd prefer to hear the podcast in Spanish, please check out 5minutebiographies.com/Spanish. Okay, let's get on with the show and episode 1 of season 13, Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was born to parents Jacques d'Arc and his wife Isabelle in the year 1412 in a village called Domrémy in France, which has since changed its name to Domrémy-la-Pucelle in honour of Joan's nickname, La Pucelle d'Orléans, the Maid of Orleans. Joan's parents were poor tenant farmers who tended the land in northeastern France during the 100 Years' War, which was a conflict between France and England that had begun over an inability for two related royal families to determine who should be heir to the French throne. The war had been going on since 1337, and by the time of Joan's birth, France was a dangerous, lawless place to live. During her early life, Joan never ventured far from home, and she learned domestic skills from her mother, becoming an excellent seamstress whilst also helping to look after the animals. When Joan was 3, the forces of King Henry V of England invaded northern France and struck a decisive blow against the French after receiving support from Burgundy. The result was the Treaty of Troyes, which in 1420 granted Henry V the right to rule France as regent for King Charles VI, who had been declared insane, with the understanding that he would inherit the French throne when Charles died. However, only 2 years later, both Charles and Henry died within months of each other, and the supporters of the future Charles VII, the infant son of the now dead Charles VI, saw an opportunity to return the throne to the French. During this time, Joan, who was now 10 years old, began experiencing visions of St. Michael and St. Catherine, during which she was declared to be the saviour of France. The visions implored her to seek an audience with the Dauphin, to ask his permission to expel the English from France so that he could be installed as the rightful king. In May 1428, Joan's visions had become so strong that she took action and sought an audience with Robert de Baudricourt, a garrison commander and a supporter of the Dauphin. At first he refused to see her, but after witnessing the support she had gained from the local community, in 1429 he granted Joan's request to speak with the future king. He supplied her with a horse and a military escort, whilst she cropped her hair and donned men's clothes for the 11-day journey to Chinon, the site of Charles's court. At first Charles did not know what to make of this young peasant girl who had described visions that had professed her to be the saviour of France, so he set her a test. When Joan successfully identified the Dauphin, who was hidden in plain clothes amongst other members of the court, he agreed to meet with her. During their meeting, Joan gave details to the Dauphin of a solemn and private prayer he had made to God, asking for the salvation of France. After the Dauphin had also had Joan examined by a group of prominent theologians who found nothing improper with her, he gave the 17-year-old girl a horse and armour and allowed her to accompany him to Orléans, where the English were besieging the city. A series of battles took place over 3 days beginning on the 4th of May 1429, during which Joan was wounded, although she recovered enough to return to the front line in time for the final assault. The French forces were successful, and by the middle of June the English had been routed. On the 18th of July 1429, the Dauphin was crowned Charles VII in Reims with Joan at his side. The following year the new king sent Joan to Compiègne to take on the Burgundians, but during the battle she was thrown from her horse and was captured. The Burgundians handed her over to the English in exchange for 10,000 francs, who in turn handed her over to the church. Joan was put on trial by the pro-English bishop Pierre Cauchon, who charged her with over 70 counts, including witchcraft and heresy. During her imprisonment, Joan was held in a military prison and was interrogated more than a dozen times between the 21st of February and the 24th of March 1431. On the 29th of May the same year, the tribunal headed by Cauchon declared Joan of Arc guilty of heresy, and she was sentenced to death. The following morning, Joan was burned at the stake in Rouen in front of a crowd of 10,000 people. She was 19 years old. The 100 Years' War lasted for another 22 years, and Charles managed to hold on to his crown. Almost immediately afterwards, a posthumous examination of Joan's trial was ordered, having been authorised by Pope Calixtus III, following a request by Joan's mother. The intent of this new trial was to determine if the first trial had been conducted fairly and justly. The Inquisitor General, Jean Bréhal, presented his findings in 1456, the summary of which considered Joan to be a martyr, and even that Pierre Cauchon had himself been guilty of heresy. Joan of Arc was declared innocent on the 7th of July 1456. She was beatified in 1909 and was canonised as Saint Joan on the 16th of May 1920 by Pope Benedict XV. I hope you enjoyed that episode of 5-Minute Biographies. If you would like to see some pictures to go with the words, please check out the YouTube channel at 5minutebiographies.com/YouTube. You can also support the show simply by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts. But if you would like to support the show more directly by, say, buying me a coffee, please take a look at 5minutebiographies.com/coffee to see how. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the 5-Minute Biographies podcast at www.5minutebiographies.com.